Welcome to Land of the Bible. I'm David Sussman. Join us on this week's adventure as we continue to travel through the Holy Land. He was a tyrant and a visionary, a builder and a brutal ruler. King Herod the Great shaped the face of ancient Judea like no one before him. Appointed by Rome and despised by many of his subjects, Herod ruled with ambition, fear, and overwhelming power. Today, on Land of the Bible, we trace Herod's complex legacy through the incredible sights he left behind. From the grand port city of Caesarea to his desert fortress at Masada, from the heights of the Herodium to the very stones of the Temple Mount, Herod's mark is carved right into the land. Through these stones, we see the rise of a man who tried to outlast time itself. This is the story of Herod, architect of power. Masada, a massive rock plateau rising nearly 400 meters above the Judean desert floor. To the east, the shimmering Dead Sea. To the west, the endless arid hills of Judea. The word Masada means fortress, but it's so much more than that. This mountain holds stories of power, rebellion, and one of the most heart-wrenching acts of defiance in Jewish history. Let's rewind a bit to the 1st century BCE. Herod the Great was many things: brilliant, brutal, and always watching his back. He didn't trust Rome, he didn't trust the people, and he certainly didn't trust his enemies in Jerusalem. So what does a paranoid genius do? He builds an escape fortress out here in the most isolated, unreachable, unforgiving parts of the land of Israel. Masada was his last resort, a place to flee when all else failed. Secure, remote, impenetrable. From here, he could see danger coming from miles away and outlast any siege. But Herod didn't just build a bunker, he built a desert palace fit for a king. On the northern tip of the mountain, carved right into the cliffside, he constructed a 3-tiered palace with breathtaking views over the Dead Sea. It had Roman-style baths, frescoed walls, mosaic floors, and wide terraces to catch the desert breeze. This wasn't just survival, this was Roman luxury, right in the middle of, well, nowhere. Now you're probably thinking, how did they survive out here? There's no river, no rain, no natural water. That's where Herod's engineers come in. They carved massive cisterns deep into the mountain to collect the rainwater. And those long rectangular buildings you see, well, they're storehouses used to keep food, oil, grain, and wine. Archaeologists even found dates and nuts that had been stored for years. Herod had created a fortress that could last years under siege with no resupply. But Herod never needed to use it. In fact, Masada faded into the background until 70 CE. That year, Jerusalem fell to the Romans. The Second Temple was destroyed. The Jewish revolt was crushed, but one group of zealots, known as the Caesarea, refused to surrender. They fled to Masada, led by Eleazar ben Yair. 972 men, women, and children turned this old fortress into their last stand. Here, they lived freely and defiantly as the Roman Empire hunted them down. In 73 CE, the Roman 10th Legion, led by General Silva, arrived to finish the job. 15,000 Roman soldiers surrounded the mountain. They built camps. They constructed a massive siege wall that is still visible today. And then they began building a ramp, a gigantic earthen assault ramp, hauling stones and dirt by hand to create a way up the cliff. The Jewish defenders could only watch as death inched closer day by day. After months of preparation, the Romans breached the walls, but when they entered Masada, they were met not with resistance, but by silence. Inside, they found that the rebels had made a devastating decision. Rather than be enslaved, they had chosen death. According to Josephus, the historians, the men had gathered and drew lots. 10 were chosen to kill the others. 1 man was left to kill the final 10, and then he killed himself. When the Romans arrived, 972 people had died by their own hands. Only a few women and children who had hidden in a cistern survived to tell the tale. Masada became a symbol of freedom, of resistance, of national identity. For generations, Jews remember Masada as the place where their ancestors chose death over slavery.
Imagine walking where Jesus walked, where faith comes to life. Feel the Bible story unfold around you, from the green Galilee to Jerusalem's ancient streets. Experience the serene and welcoming land of the Bible, where miracles happen. Put your heart where His footsteps are. Visit Israel.
Welcome to Caesarea. Imagine standing here 2,000 years ago, the sound of Roman trumpets echoing over the Mediterranean, chariots thundering through the hippodrome, the sea crashing against the marble palaces. This isn't just a city, it's a message carved in stone, a message from Herod to Rome. So why did Herod build Caesarea? Simple. Power, politics, and one man's relentless need to prove himself. Herod wasn't fully Jewish. He was Edomian, appointed king of the Jews by Rome, and not by the Jewish people. His throne was given, not earned, and he knew it. So what do you do when you're a client king in a tough neighborhood, sandwiched between loyalists and rebels? you prove yourself to Rome. Caesarea was Herod's love letter to the Roman Empire, a showcase, a political flex. He named it after Caesar Augustus, his patron and most powerful man at that time in the entire world. In doing so, Herod said, "Look, I'm not just loyal, I'm Roman." To really impress Caesar and everyone else, Herod built his palace into the sea. Not by the sea, in it. Imagine this, a private residence with its own swimming pool surrounded by crashing waves, marble courtyards stretching into the Mediterranean, flanked by columns and statues imported from across the empire. It was a place for a king, a place where land met sea and power met ego. This wasn't just architecture, it was theater, and Herod was the star. But the real jaw-dropper was the harbor. Herod built the largest man-made harbor in the Roman world, right here in Caesarea. It was called Sebastus, the Greek name for Augustus. But how do you build a harbor in open sea with no natural bay? Herod's builders poured concrete underwater, a cutting-edge Roman technique. They used volcanic ash mixed with lime to create hydraulic cement that hardened in the water. This technology was centuries ahead of its time. The result, a massive breakwater extending into the sea, protecting ships from storms and creating a safe haven for international trade. Caesarea became a critical port connecting Judea with the entire Mediterranean world. More than trade, it was symbolism. Herod turned a stretch of coastline into a Roman marvel, proving he wasn't just a provincial king, he was an imperial partner. And then there was the theater, the first of its kind in the entire region. It wasn't just built, it was crafted. Arched entranceways, a perfectly engineered semicircle, superb acoustics, all designed to mirror the theaters of Rome. Why? Because theater was Roman civilization at its best. Drama, art, politics, entertainment, all in one. By building it, Herod brought Rome to Judea. When Roman dignitaries visited, they didn't feel like they were in Israel. They felt at home. And for Herod, that was the point. Now walk with me in your mind to the Hippodrome, aka the racetrack. Long and narrow, sand-covered, lined with tens of thousands of shouting spectators. This was the Roman circus, the Formula One of the ancient world. Chariot racing wasn't just entertainment, it was a symbol of Roman life. Adrenaline, competition, pageantry. Herod's Hippodrome showed he could play the Roman game and play it well. It was his way of saying, my people may resist Rome, but look at me, I embrace it. In the end, Caesarea wasn't just a city, it was a statement. It said, I am Herod, I serve Caesar, and I bring Rome to Judea. Let's talk about Herod's greatest building project, the Temple Mount. Imagine standing here, Jerusalem, 2,000 years ago. The city's buzzing. Priests in white linen walk swiftly across the stone courts. The smell of incense drifts through the air. And tens of thousands of pilgrims fill the streets, all looking up at a shining wonder of the ancient world. Towering above the city is the Temple Mount, and at its heart, the temple, grander than Solomon's, more dazzling than any shrine in Rome. But why? Why did Herod, a client king of Rome, half Jewish, half Edomian, build this? And how did it become the most contested, beloved, and sacred piece of real estate in the entire world? Herod ruled with an iron fist, brilliant, paranoid, ruthless. Rome didn't fully trust him. The Jews resented him. So how do you win over both sides? You build something so magnificent, so overwhelming that it cements your loyalty to Rome and your claim to Jewish kingship in one monumental stroke. That something was the Second Temple, rebuilt, expanded beyond imagination. This wasn't just a facelift. Herod dreamed of replacing modest holiness with imperial glory. He would take the small temple built after the Babylonian exile and surround it with a colossal man-made platform, turning a rugged hilltop into the largest sacred complex in the world. Now here's the thing. The hill the temple sat on wasn't big enough for Herod's vision, so what did he do? He turned the mountain into a platform. Thousands of workers labored for decades to construct giant retaining walls around the hill. They filled the spaces with arches and earth, creating a flat, elevated plaza the size of 12 football fields, over 36 acres. Some of the foundation stones used to build the walls weigh over 500 tons. These are among the largest stones ever moved by man, and they're still there till today. At the center stood the Holy Temple, rising nearly 15 stories, covered in white stone and gold. It blinded visitors in the sunlight. The Talmud says, whoever has not seen Herod's temple has not seen a beautiful building in their life. This was the place where the high priest entered the Holy of Holies once a year on Yom Kippur. Sacrifices were made daily for the nation, and pilgrims from everywhere came to worship during Passover, Sukkot, and Shavuot. It was the beating heart of Jewish life. But Herod wasn't only concerned with worship. At the northwest corner of the Temple Mount, he built the Antonia Fortress, named after Mark Antony. It stood like a military shadow over the temple. High towers, armed Roman guards, barracks for 1,000 soldiers. Why? Because Herod didn't trust the people. He knew that religion and rebellion go hand in hand. From the Antonia Fortress, soldiers could monitor the crowds and crush unrest in an instant. And indeed, just 70 years later, when the rebellion did come, this is where the Romans launched their assault on the temple. In 70 CE, the unthinkable happened. The Romans destroyed the temple. Flames consumed the sanctuary, and the gold melted into the cracks of the stones. All that remained were the retaining walls, and one of them, only one, would become eternal, the Western Wall. This is not the wall of the temple itself. It's a section of the retaining walls that held up the platform. But because it faced closest to the Holy of Holies, it became the most sacred place that Jews could approach after the temple was destroyed. Today, it is where people pray, cry, celebrate, a living connection to the ancient temple that once stood up above.
I will bless those who bless you, God promised Abraham. Embrace this covenant by connecting with the people of Israel. From Jerusalem's stones to Galilee's shores, experience living faith through their traditions and hospitality. Your journey is more than visiting biblical sites. It's about hearts that welcome your friendship. Your presence matters. Discover Israel.
Welcome to Herodium, a man-made mountain, a palace, a fortress, and final resting place of Herod the Great. A place where ambition meets obsession, and stones tell the story of a man who can never stop looking over his shoulder, even in death. This is where Herod won his greatest personal battle. Decades before he was king, Herod was on the run. His enemies were closing in. But here, in this spot, he decided to turn around and fight. And fight he did until he won. So what does a man like Herod do? He builds a monument to his own victory. Not just a monument, a mountain. Herod took this modest hill and he made it higher. He literally built his legacy out of earth and stone, raising it above the desert, as if to say, this is where I conquered, this is where I'll reign, this is where I'll be remembered. But Herod didn't stop with just a hill. He hollowed it out, and inside he built a palace fortress, a circular citadel surrounded by towers with royal apartments, Roman baths, audience halls, and a theater. All of it hidden within the mountain. Why? Because Herod was brilliant and terrified. He trusted no one, not the priest, not the Romans, not even his own family. So he built his palace inside a mountain, part sanctuary, part surveillance post. From the top, he could see Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and the desert stretching all the way to the Dead Sea. No surprise attacks, no ambushes. This was more than luxury. It was control within safe grounds. And below the mountain, Herod created a royal retreat. Here he built a massive pool, so large it had its own island. He constructed guest villas, a garden pavilion, a Roman bathhouse with hot and cold pools, mosaic floors, and frescoed walls. It was desert luxury on a Roman scale. Think of it like this: the lower palace was where he entertained, the upper palace was where he hid. Together, they were a reflection of his split personality, grandeur above, paranoia within. Now, Herod had dozens of palaces, but he chose to be buried here. Why? Because Herodium was his personal myth, his victory, his creation. He wanted to be buried inside the very mountain he built, in the place where his story began, and where he could be remembered as both conqueror and king. He commissioned a monumental mausoleum, halfway up the slope, a 3-storied stone structure, grand and visible to anyone passing below. But he also ensured that the tomb would be hard to reach. as if his legacy needed both admiration and protection. And yet, that protection didn't last. About 70 years after Herod's death, during the great Jewish revolt against Rome, rebels seized Herodium. To them, Herod wasn't a hero. He was a Roman puppet, a symbol of betrayal and excess. And so, in one of the most poetic acts of rebellion, they destroyed his tomb. They smashed it, desecrated, erased it. Herodium is more than a pile of stones. It is Herod's ultimate paradox, a fortress to hide in, a place to rule from, a tomb to be remembered by, and a monument rebels tried to erase. It tells us everything about this man, his brilliance, his paranoia, his pride. He conquered this hill, raised it into a mountain, and buried himself inside. Herod built the Herodium not just as a place to die, but as a place to be immortal. When David Ben-Gurion looked at the Negev desert, he didn't see emptiness. He saw the future. Join us on this week's adventure as we continue to travel through the Holy Land. Thank you for watching. Make sure to join us next time as we connect you to the people, places, and lands of the Bible.